how is this premise still able to be told is beyond me. What's up everyone, this is Joshua here. Welcome back to Epictastic Joshua, where I talk movies, TV, music, and all that such. Giving you guys my thoughts on the latest A24 movie, Miller's Girl. This is a thriller, drama, comedy that's written and directed by Jade, Halley, Bartlett, and stars Jenna Ortega and Martin Freeman. And this is also produced by Seth Rogen and Goldberg. So this movie is, we follow a creative writing assignment that yields complex results between a teacher and his talented students. If it goes on, we follow this and it becomes an obsessive relationship. So to be honest, this was a movie that I heard nothing about. I didn't see a trailer. All I saw was a poster, but I was interested enough to see how a premise like this will turn out, considering that you had Seth Rogen and you had Goldberg producing, and you had two great actors. Martin Freeman, who's well known for stuff like Sherlock and the Hobbit trilogy, and then you have the great Jenna Ortega, who is out here making a name for herself. Which is why it kind of frustrates me to say that this movie is not the worst movie of 2024. I'll tell you that. It's definitely not as bad as Founders Day, but it's not very good either. This movie had a lot of potential. Unfortunately, this movie is so far one of the bigger disappointments of 2023. Starting off with what I liked in this movie is, I think the performances overall, Martin Freeman and Jenna Ortega, who is as usual fantastic here. She is great in this. Even if the movie's not very good like this, Jenna Ortega is gonna try and give a good performance, but she's still a very rising talent here. And I think overall those two performances are fine. They do good, and they do give a lot of great performances despite the material that they have to work with. I would also say this movie is shortly paced. It's a short movie. It's only 95 minutes, so it's an easy breeze to get through. I'm not sitting here for 3 hours and 45 minutes or 2 hours and 21 minutes or an hour and 54. And I will also say the direction is nice by Jade Halley Barrett. I think it does fine. The direction is decent. The cinematography is also fine. There's a good score in the movie here. And when the movie delves into it, or at least tries to, there's moments of potential where they want to try and go as far as they can to show the dangers of a student and teacher relationship and how this easily backfires. Some of the rest of the cast is very hit and miss. Some of them, like you have Gideon Adlon, which I like her in other things like the Craft Legacy and the DC animated movies that she's done, and even Blockers. She did fine. Bashir Salahuddin, he was good in Top Gun Maverick. He did fine. And I also thought that Dagmara Domińczyk, she did fine for what she was given. But on the other side, you'll have Christine Adams and a few other actors who are really phoning this in. The cast is very split in the hit and miss. Unfortunately, you can have all those moments of potential and you can have good performances with Jenna Ortega and the rest of the cast, but biggest downfall in this movie nearly falls flat. Like I said, the rest of the cast is hit and miss. Some I like, but that one performance I just mentioned, wow. She was just hamming it up like it wasn't nothing. The biggest problem that this movie has is that this is a movie that is having to tackle on a pretty intense subject matter. And I get the fact that because we're in the Me Too era and we're in this whole cancel culture era, which fuck cancel culture.
Correct!
This movie didn't really do much for me. And this is coming from somebody who I wanted to enjoy this movie as a drama. The uncomfortable subject matter, when they want to go deep into it, I was interested in it because this is a subject matter that is basically real life, and this is basically something that does go on in the everyday world. But it's not shock value for the sake of shock value, but it doesn't even try to be as intelligent or have some value worthy substance behind the substance. And I can't really say this is pretentious, but the biggest fault of this movie is that this movie is not that really well written as it could have been. This movie, I understand we're in the cancel culture era. Well, I understand we're in the Me Too era. But when you're clearly trying to shed light on some very sensitive topics, like the harmfulness and the impact that this student-teacher relationship can have on both characters, and when you're trying to go into a twisted direction when it comes to this, it doesn't do the best thing that. And for a good portion of this, it feels like this movie actually wants to have the balls and actually try and do that. Biggest problem with this movie is very safe, it's very lowbrow, and it feels extremely afraid to go into a lot of the challenging and uncomfortable subjects for viewers, and instead just decide to go for the most safest writing possible that it leaves you more freaking frustrated at everything. And there are plenty of scenes throughout this movie that hints at this movie. It wants to go in a more provocative and weird direction when it goes to this. That were probably added just to have people talk about it a little more, and it kind of doesn't feel like you're going for it here. It also doesn't help to the fact that the screenplay needed a secondary take, because you definitely needed someone who's actually had more experience with the situation or did enough research when it comes to this situation to actually tell the story, because some of the dialogue and some of the character development is just not there in this. And there's once an idea of what they want to go for, but it takes you out of the movie in a lot of wells. And look, I understand, again, we're in the cancel culture Me Too era, but you gotta at least touch on these subjects.
So much fire, such a waste
of what happens with a student-teacher relationship and how that can affect his life and her life and how far you can go. And it doesn't really feel incomplete here. And while there's good moments that work, it just feels like the movie doesn't fully go full force in terms of that. And not to mention, in terms of that, though, this is something that has been done better way more in stuff, TV movies or movies that you'll find in theaters back in the early 80s, 90s, or even the early 2000s, or in Tubi or on Netflix or Lifetime. You're playing into heavy subject matter like this, and when there's been a lot of other better movies that's played into this, movies like Lifetime movies like My Teacher of My Obsession or Dirty Teacher with Josie Davis, it's just not pretty all that 100% through line, because it feels like we have to just make this as safe as possible. Also, let me say something, the pacing and the editing of this movie, even though this is a short movie, 95 minutes, this feels like 135 minutes, because nothing of interesting was happening. I thought this was boring, and I thought it was just not moving in the way that it should have, because you don't have the strong enough characters or strong enough writing to make this fully work. If all of that wasn't bad enough, the biggest crime of this movie is the twist and climax. When you get to this ending and you get to this climax, the payoff is not worth it whatsoever. And unfortunately, because of that, it doesn't really go through with that. You can do a movie like this in a good way, but it doesn't go through it in through line. There's been plenty of movies I've watched that dealt with this. In the end, guys, do I hate Miller's Girl? Is this gonna go on the worst movies of 2024? No. There is some good performances in here. There is moments of potential, and I think the direction is fine. But unfortunately, this is a movie that, because of the subject matter, and because they don't go as far as they should have with it, it makes it for a very dull and a very bland movie to watch. Now, there's gonna be some people who's gonna actually kind of defend this and say it's an underrated gem, and then you're gonna have people like me who's gonna go into this and just unfortunately find this very disappointing. And it's a shame, because you have two talented actors at work, and you have a director who has potential, but unfortunately I just think the potential is just not met. And at the end of the day, it's not horrible, it's just a movie that should have been a lot better. If you want to give this movie a chance, I guess go out and see it. But if you're willing to wait a couple months, you can find this at Redbox or something. I'm sure you'll come across it there. Well, that's going to do it for the video that you just watched. If you want to see more, my channel icon is up here. If you want to see more content from me, all my social medias are right here in this end card. I will also leave a playlist and a video here for you to see what the channel is about. As always, acknowledge me, stay Epictastic, join the Epictasticness, and you guys keep it cool.